And welcome to another edition of Spits and Suds on 105.3 The Fan. I'm Gavin Spittle. Thank you so much for A, listening, and B, supporting Spits and Suds. You guys are growing this program, and we truly appreciate the partnership. We got a good one today, Friday night, nice tilt up north in Winnipeg, and Winnipeg Jets content creator and contributor for @Sports Talk Winnipeg. Also a writer for Illegal Curve. You've heard him on this program several times. The co-host of Level Flight Winnipeg podcast @Connor Hrabchak with an H. Gotta love that silent H. Connor, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing well. I'm fired up for this game. It's gonna be a fun one. 1 versus 2, not only in the Central but in the West as well. It doesn't get much better than this in the middle of March. So I'm looking forward to it. It's gonna be fun.
Yeah, are they talking about the game in Winnipeg?
Oh yeah. Well, okay, look, they have 2 days off before the game. So we have 2 days to, pump this game up. It's a Friday night game. The barn's gonna be buzzing.
Nice.
It's not quite your guys' like second Four Nations break that you're on right now with, a game Sunday and then a whole week off. Like guys probably went to Cabo and spending 3 days there between games, but it's 2 days off, which is nice.
Well deserved after going to Finland, right?
Right. Fair enough. Yes.
Yeah.
Good point. Good point. Yeah.
Exactly. All right. So fan base, you're part of the media. What was the overall thoughts as far as Winnipeg's activity at the trade deadline?
I think originally it was a little bit of disappointment. The Jets have such kind of a glaring need at that second line center role. Now, Vladimir Meskov has filled in admirably this season so far in the middle of Nikolai Ehlers and Cole Perfetti. That line has actually been really good the last 15, 20 games. Their goals are up. Their analytics are up. They're trending in the right direction. But when you have someone who's making $2-3 million as your second line center, as a veteran, that's kind of just a natural spot that the Jets have wanted to upgrade year after year. They went and got Sean Monahan last year. So the Jets didn't go get a second line center. And I think that's where the disappointment was. But the 2 players they did get in Brandon Tanev, a reunion, he spent 4 seasons here, and Luke Schenn are going to make the Jets a lot tougher to play against in the playoffs. Like Brandon Tanev will run through a wall for anyone. Let alone the Winnipeg Jets and the players that he, played the 4 seasons with and are still there. Get this, Brandon Tanev was on a flight on trade deadline day at 2:00. The Jets played at 6. And by the middle of the second period, someone took like a half-hearted swipe at Connor Hellebuyck's glove, and he like absolutely tackled the guy and like wanted to fight him. Like he got off the plane 4 hours ago, and he's already laying his life on the line for the team. Like
it runs in the family,
Yeah, exactly.
We saw that in Dallas last year.
For sure. Yeah, so the players they did get in Tanev and Schenn are physical. They're playoff style players, and no one had any issues with those moves. It was more the moves the Jets didn't make in acquiring a second line center where maybe there's a bit of disappointment, but everyone knows that this is a really good hockey team. They're going to, have to win off of Connor Hellebuyck and Josh Morrissey and their stars anyways. So it's going to be interesting down the stretch here.
Well, I would say Kevin Scheifele, day off, the general manager, that Brock Nelson deal, they gave up a lot to the Islanders to get him for a rental. I mean, maybe they'll re-sign him, but at the same time, that was a lot for a player who could be just a rental. At least when Dallas went and got Mikko Rantanen, you are paying a price. You are giving up 2 first-round picks and a good prospect in Logan Stankoven, but at least you now are set for the next 8 years.
Yes, and a report came out the next day that Brock Nelson didn't want to play in Canada. Apparently that was a part of it as well. Kevin Cheveldayoff clearly had an offer on the table, got outbid by the Colorado Avalanche. And like you said, they paid a lot. Like Callum Ritchie is a very good prospect, and they gave up a first. There's no extension in place. Like that is a lot for a rental. And I get it. Colorado's in their prime years. McKinnon and Makar are never going to be as good as they are right now. So you might as well, go for it. I like the move from Colorado's angle, but I don't know. The Jets left the deadline with $6 million in deadline cap space. You got to think that Brock Nelson was plan A for that second line center role that everyone was disappointed they didn't add. They got outbid by someone in the division, the team they lost to in the playoffs last year, which hurts that much more. And then Dallas went out and got Mikko Rantanen for the next 8 years. I mean, it was a nice 2 weeks not having Rantanen in the division, but now he's back for the next 8 years with Dallas. But yeah, part of the disappointment with the Jets deadline was how good the two teams in the Central around them got with Rantanen and Nelson going to Dallas and Colorado respectively. But yeah, that's a lot to give up if you're Colorado, but they have a really good chance. They have their goaltending now. I kind of like it for them.
Yeah, and some drama around here actually, because Rod Brindamore came out and talked about how Mikko Rantanen said, "I'm not, I have 4 teams and you're not one of them." And Rantanen at practice today told our very own Spits and Suds, Robert Tiffin of starsthoughts.com, that's absolutely not true. I actually thought about signing with Carolina. So it's like, who can
Wow.
tell in these situations? And I mean, honestly, I think Rantanen was still reeling from Colorado, because I think he was genuinely shocked. And I think if Colorado put on the table 8 for 12, he probably would be on the Avalanche. It's just an interesting situation that, Dallas certainly benefited from. From an outsider's perspective, how did you look at, as far as the Rantanen deal, and how have others in Winnipeg, as far as how it affects the Stars?
Yeah, I think it's a really smart move. It's a opportunistic move by Jim Nill and the Dallas Stars to go out and get Mikko Rantanen, because that's really interesting. The that he considered signing with Carolina, and he said that today, because
Yeah.
that is I mean, he was clearly shook by the move from Colorado, and then immediately had to make a life decision for the next 8 years, and chose that he didn't want that to be Carolina. And good on Dallas for not only agreeing to the trade late Thursday night, or at least that's what the reports were, but figuring out the contract the entire next day and making sure they had him for the next 8 years, because then you would have been giving up Stankoven and 2 firsts for a guy who maybe walks in the summer.
Yeah.
So I think it's a great move for the Stars. It fits their window. Mikko Rantanen is a superstar. He's a proven playoff performer. I think he'll have chemistry with Roope Hintz and Jason Robertson once Hintz is healthy and back to playing on that top line. I don't know if he's projected to play Friday or anything like that with the full week off, but I think it's a really, really good move for the Dallas Stars. And I mean, here in Winnipeg, our view of the Stars is like they'll always be there no matter what. And that this doesn't really change that. Like the Jets are always going to have to go through the Stars in the Central, in the playoffs. And last year they didn't, because they lost to Colorado, but Dallas was the 1 seed and went to the Western Conference Finals. So Dallas is always going to be there, and this move is only going to make them better in the playoffs.
One of our listeners asked about Pete DeBoer becoming coach of the year in the NHL due to the injuries to Sagan and Heiskanen, and just hanging in there and playing well. And my response was, sure, Pete DeBoer's had a great year as far as coaching, sticking with what he felt would work on the power play. And turns out that the power play is much better. But I replied, my 3 for coach of the year: Spencer Carberry in Washington, what Dean Evason's been able to do in Columbus, and Scott Arniel. So I think any of those 3 could win coach of the year.
I 100% agree with you. I would give it to Spencer Carberry if the season ended today. Washington made the playoffs last year as the 8 seed with a negative goal differential, and everyone predicted them to fall backwards from that, where they fell backwards into the playoffs. Everyone was projecting them to miss the playoffs. Alexander Ovechkin's having a great year with this great chase. And they're the number 1 team in the East by a lot. They're right there with the President's Trophy. And there's a lot of similarities with Washington and Winnipeg, I think, in the sense that they're both teams that, disappointed in the playoffs last year. Obviously, Winnipeg had more points than Washington in a lot of them, but teams that maybe coming into the season, everyone was predicting them to maybe be a wild card team at best. And now they're both fighting for the President's Trophy, and they're up there with great goaltending, great special teams. And the coaches deserve a lot of credit. So I put Carberry and Arniel in there, and Dean Evason. Yeah, I mean, like the tragedy of Johnny Gaudreau and rallying that team to a playoff spot where no one predicted them to be in a playoff spot based on their roster on paper is incredibly impressive. And he's working with a hurt locker room, and to do it on top of all of that is incredibly impressive. So I 100% agree with your top 3 there.
I know we talked about it earlier in the year, but for our listeners, Scott Arniel was on Rick Bonus's staff, and I watch Winnipeg now and their goal differential and their offensive power and their consistency and what they've been able to do on the power play. And I don't know why, but it just keeps resonating that this man was on last year's staff. And has he spoken about it in any way? How I just haven't seen an assistant coach like this come in, and the change is almost as if he was in completely a different organization. How the players have responded and the implementation of what he's been able to do.
Well, a lot of what he's done this year is very similar. Like Rick Bonus's fingerprints are all over this team
Okay,
still, especially with the defensive structure. This team is shutting down opposition. Connor Hellebuyck's still great, which helps any new coach. But where the big difference is this year is in the assistant coaches. And I know Arneal was one of the assistant coaches last year, but the Jets brought in two assistant coaches out of the organization into the organization this year, and Davis Payne, who runs the power play, and Dean Chenoth, who runs the penalty kill. And the power play is like flirting with the best power play in NHL history. It's like up over 32%. The Oilers set the all-time record a few years ago at 32.4%. The Jets are right there. So to take the 22nd best power play last year and make it one of the best in NHL history, I mean, that is such a massive upgrade for this Jets team and adds to that firepower, like you said. And then Dean Chenoth, the penalty kill has slowly been getting better. The Luke Shen edition is really going to help that. The Brandon Tanev edition is really going to help that. Since February, I believe they're sixth or seventh best in the NHL in penalty kill percentage. So if the Jets can take this goaltending, which is, he's going to win the Vezina, he might even win the Hart Trophy, into the playoffs with the number one power play and maybe a top 10 penalty kill, and the way that they're playing on 5-on-5, which was Rick Bonus's specialty, he had this team playing great at 5-on-5. It's just going to be maybe a perfect storm, and that's kind of the ideal scenario for the Jets heading into the playoffs.
You mentioned assistant coaches. I was always a big Pascal Vincent guy, and I know he was such a big part of the Winnipeg organization. Leaves, ends up, coaching in Columbus, and doesn't work out in Columbus. Now he's with the Laval Rockets in the AHL. But was there talk about bringing him back into the organization?
There was. When the assistant coaching roles were open, he was one of the names that it wasn't thrown out there by Scott Arneal or any of the management names as like someone they were looking at, but it was thrown out, us media people speculating and things like
Sure.
that. And he was here with the Moose a long time as
Yep.
well. That he would have had ties to the organization, and I think that would have been a good move. But I like how the Jets, people sometimes fault True North and the management for being like too loyal here, or loyal to their guys essentially. And what they did with these two assistants is they went out of house, out of the organization with Davis Payne and Dean Chenoth, two fresh perspectives, two outside perspectives that brought them in. And clearly it's benefited with the special teams being so much better this year than it was last year.
Tell me about Mark Scheifele. I mean, just a consistent gamer. Unfortunately, no Tyler Seguin where they can play the game as far as who gets off the
Right.
ice last in warmups. That's always fun. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, we don't talk about, there are players around the NHL. Like I tweeted the other day about Anze Kopitar. I think if you ask people about Anze Kopitar, they don't know. And the reality is that the guy's a first ballot, amazing two-way player. And I look at Scheifele and just a guy year in and year out, and just kind of similar to what Jamie Benn kind of has had a reemergence as far as, his career. It looked like Scheifele, maybe the numbers were ticking down, and then all of a sudden gets re-signed in Winnipeg and it's paying off.
Yeah, signed long term here. He's in year one of his 7-year extension as the top line center. And yeah, he's been incredible. I mean, the power play being at 32% or up above 32%, he has a big role in that as kind of the facilitator from the wall. There's tons of movement and motion on the power play. So he, last year maybe had the puck too much on his stick on the power play, and that's not his fault. But when, the puck was sticking there and they weren't really moving enough, that's when you saw the Jets power play at its worst. And now there's so much movement, so many options, and he's facilitating it all. But even strength, I mean, the Jets have kind of found something with this top line of Kyle Connor, Mark Scheifele, and Gabe Vilardi. As of late, coming out of the break, they've had one of their valleys. There's a lot of peaks and valleys with this line. They're pretty inconsistent. They'll go on an absolute tear for 2 weeks and look like the best line in hockey. And then for the next week, They won't generate nearly as much at 5-on-5. They'll spend too much time in their own zone. So Mark Scheifele, for the contributions to the power play and those peaks with the top line, has been an incredible top line center this year. But a lot of people here in the market would like to see that top unit be a little bit more consistent, because we all know if you have a bad week in the playoffs, your season's over, right? So
Yeah.
if you have one of those bad weeks come postseason time, you won't be playing anymore. So it's Mark Scheifele's been the driver of the Jets offense this year. You see it in his numbers. He's, on pace for near a career high in goals and points and assists and everything like that. And at 31 years old, I believe it is. Yeah, it's definitely a career resurgence. And Scott O'Neill has this power play and this top line at times playing really, really good hockey.
I love having you and others on to preview games because you can give some nuggets about Winnipeg that we might not know to look for on Friday nights. So our listeners, when watching the game and something happens, that Connor Hrabchak, he was right on about that. What should we tell our Spits and Suds listeners about previewing Winnipeg, what they bring to the table, and what the Stars, should be worried about as far as, the game on Friday night?
Don't take a penalty. This power
Sure.
play is unstoppable, or at least seemingly unstoppable. There's just so many options. Gabe Vilardi at the side of the net. He scored his 27th goal of the year last night against the New York Rangers. And he's a guy who has never been healthy for a full season. And now that he's on pace for, 35 goals and having an incredible year. So he's on that top line with Mark Scheifele and Kyle Connor on the top power play unit. He's been awesome. But as of late, it's been that second line that's been really great. And Cole Perfetti, number 91, he has been a player that at this time last year was struggling mightily. The Jets went out and got Tyler Toffoli at the deadline because they couldn't trust Perfetti in the playoffs and down the stretch. Now this year, he's completely revamped his game. He's become a top 6 winger in every sense of the word. And as of late, he's looking more and more confident game by game. So I think if the Jets are going to win this game on Friday night, it's going to be on the backs of Connor Hellebuyck, of course. Stars fans are well aware that Connor Hellebuyck's a great goalie, so nothing new there. It is a great goaltender matchup, just as an aside. Hellebuyck versus Ottinger will be great. But the power play, if you take a penalty in a key spot, watch out, because this Jets power play is lethal. And watch for Cole Perfetti, because he's looking better and better by the game. So he's a guy that might have a big impact on this one.
And I'll also mention Stars killer Kyle Connor. Just always comes up big against Dallas.
He's been struggling as of late, but if there's anyone that he could, pop out and refine his game against, it's Dallas for sure.
All right, two more for you, my friend. One, I get frustrated with the Connor Hellebuyck can't win the big game narrative. I thought he was terrific in Four Nations. Certainly not the reason that Canada beat the U.S. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
But we got you in World Juniors, so I guess we're even kind of. Maybe, I don't know. But I mean, it just frustrates me because I just say, he's the best in the world, and he's just so consistent, and obviously, I think he's going to be a finalist, but should probably win the Vezina this year as well. I mean, talk about him as a gamer, and is that narrative something that internationally we talked about, but do they talk about it in Winnipeg circles?
Oh, we absolutely do, and we definitely talk about it with the lens of, we don't like this narrative, and we think it's a bogus narrative. I mean, we're in Winnipeg, so obviously we're gonna defend our guy, but in the bubble playoffs in the COVID year, the Jets swept the Oilers and they got outplayed in every single game. Like, there was not one game where the Jets were the better team against the Edmonton Oilers, and they won that series in 4 games on the backs of Connor Hellebuyck. Like, Connor McDavid had so many chances in that series. I think he didn't score his first goal until like the last game of the series, or maybe it was game 3. But the Jets went to a few overtimes in that series. They won a game 1-0. Like that, those were playoff games that Connor Hellebuyck was the best player on the ice, and there was nothing the Oilers could do. Last year against the Avalanche, the entire team in front of him collapsed. With the Four Nations, I mean, some people will still say it, and you leave Connor McDavid wide open in the slot, in overtime. How is that Connor Hellebuyck's fault that he can't win the big game,
Yeah.
But that was the common thing. you watch the USA Finland game and the first goal goes in that goes kind of off a defender's stick and looks kind of weak. And everyone's like, oh my goodness, Connor Hellebuyck, it's a big game. He can't get it done. Right.
Yeah.
And then what does he do? He goes on the road in the Bell Center and stones Canada and they win 3-1. I know they didn't win the finals, but like I said, Connor McDavid's wide open in the slot. Not much you can do there. I think it's a ridiculous narrative. His save percentage this year is 927, goals against average 199. He's got 38 wins. The win record for a goaltender is in play for him this year. The Vezina, I think he's got pretty sewn up. We've got our sights set on the Hart Trophy here in Winnipeg with Connor Hellebuyck. But yeah, I think it's ridiculous. The team last year absolutely collapsed in front of him, and there was nothing he could really do against the Colorado Avalanche. And I think he has his sights set on proving that narrative wrong this time in the playoffs because he's just so dialed in and such a gamer, like you said.
Yeah, absolutely. 9-point advantage by Winnipeg with a plus 77 goal differential. And here's something Stars fans also need to know: 24-5-4. That barn is a tough win this year.
Yeah, it's been a fun year at Canada Life Center. Attendance is up. Last year it was a big issue with Gary Bettman coming to town, and he came to town and said, "No, I'm not concerned. I'm just doing my rounds, but I'm doing a press conference in Winnipeg." It was like, what? Anyways, attendance is up this year. The barn is more full. It's incredible atmosphere, and on Friday night against the Stars, it's going to be a sellout crowd. 1 versus 2 in the Central and the West. That barn is going to be absolutely hopping. And I don't know. The Jets this year, the Jets fans appreciate the product on the ice this year. And what they're going to bring Friday night is an energized crowd, and the Jets are going to be able to feed off of that. So I know there's one more matchup this year in Dallas between these two teams, but Friday night, the Jets will definitely take that home ice advantage. And that's what they're playing for down the stretch here, is that 1 seed in the West to get home ice advantage through the playoffs, have the playoffs run through Canada Life Center, when we know in the playoffs, the whiteout, it's maybe one of the best atmospheres in hockey and pro sports. So that barn, when it's full and it's a big game and the fans know it, is always great. So I'm looking forward to it Friday night.
Stars currently with an 8-point deficit to Winnipeg. Colorado just 5 points back. Do the Avs kind of scare you that they're coming on this time of year?
I don't know. Like, I think the biggest thing for the Jets this time of year is to stay in the 1 seed so that they don't play Colorado.
Right.
I don't see a scenario in which Colorado leapfrogs the Jets 13, 14 points here, and the Jets play the Stars in round 1. But that's what we're talking about all week long here on Winnipeg Sports Talk, is get that 1 seed so that Dallas and Colorado beat each other up for 7 games. And then we get whoever limps into round 2. That's the game plan. At least, the players and coaches won't admit it. They want to win every game, of course. But like I said, us media people, we can speculate. That's what we want here, is that 1 seed. And to avoid Dallas and Colorado, because there was a piece at The Athletic today about, who's the best team in the Central, and they all made arguments for each of those 3 teams, and it could really go either way between all of those 3 teams. So avoiding the other 2 in the first round would be awesome. And then there's a massive drop off between playing Colorado and playing Calgary or Vancouver, or whoever would limp into that second wild card spot. So
I was going to ask you. It looks like Minnesota most likely will get the first wild card, but between Calgary, Vancouver, St. Louis, and Utah, who do you want?
Yeah, I don't know. Utah would be kind of fun. I just think that the atmosphere would be awesome in Utah. I think
Vancouver.
I would want Vancouver. Yeah, there's been so much noise around them this year. I know Elias Pettersson has 2 goals recently, the last couple of games, but he hasn't looked himself. And Calgary, I think, like, Dustin Wolf is a true legit starting goaltender in this league, and they're tough. Yeah, they're big team, big tough team with a good goalie. So I'd go Vancouver there. They've had so much drama around them, and I don't think noise is a good thing when you're a Canadian market team. So I would go Vancouver of my preference.
Excellent preview. I want all you guys to follow at Connor Hrabchak. We'll when we tweet this out, we'll tag him. Winnipeg Jets content creator and contributor, talks a lot of NHL as well, at Sports Talk Winnipeg. Also writer for Illegal Curve and the co-host of Level Flight Winnipeg. the podcast, my friend. Home run every single time.
This is an absolute blast. Thanks for having me, Gavin.
Absolutely. That's going to do it for another episode of Spits and Suds. We truly appreciate you listening. Hopefully we gave you a good preview of Winnipeg, and we'll be back with another episode soon right here on 105.3 The Fan. Until then, have a great day, everyone.